Welcome to your in-depth monthly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for June 2025. I'm going to give you some standout details to begin with, then on screen share the event chart right at the start of the month, always influential as a backdrop for the whole period. I'll then share in detail all the influences, and there are some very powerful events this month, frame by frame, to create a clear picture that we can all collectively relate to, then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour for those which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. A warm welcome. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions are truly appreciated. If you're new to the channel, please share any thoughts you have. This is very much a community. If you've yet to sub, please help the channel to thrive and do so now. But please also do please click or tap the bell notification symbol. As we go into this month, we have a very charismatic link between the Sun and Mercury in the sign of Gemini. Mercury, of course, being the ruler of the sign, they were actually in an exact conjunction as May came to a close at Cazimi. So that bubbliness is something to really savour. And that could give us an appetite to socialise and mix and mingle. It's just that we do have, at the start of a month, for the first time in our lifetimes, the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And that's truly significant. And I will be unpacking that for you because this month does have some complexities, to be honest. Now, of course, Jupiter, the planet of growth and optimism, which has been making its way through the sign of Gemini since late May last year, but has been challenged by Saturn persistently through that whole period, moves into the sign of Cancer. The significance on the 9th is that Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. What can we expect over the following year? We also have on the 11th a full moon in the very freedom-loving sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius loves the big picture. On the other side of the heavens, we have the chatty sun in the sign of Gemini. But intersecting the two positions is in a grand mutable cross, the nodal axis, with the north node in the feeling sign of Pisces. What's the significance of that? On the 17th, Mars comes back to the sign of Virgo after some absence. If you recall, Mars has been in the sign of Leo since the middle of April, but it was actually in Leo from the end of the first week of November through to the end of the first week of January. So we've had two sections in two segments of Mars in Leo, forging a very bruising opposition with Pluto, but it moves to the sign of practicalities through to the 6th of August. I'll explain the significance of that. The 21st of this month is one of astrology's most powerful events. It's the summer solstice. Of course, in the northern hemisphere, it's the longest day. So very, very significant. But we also need to be aware that in Western tropical astrology, the year is divided into 4. It's based on the seasons. So we're coming to the end of Cardinal Quadrant 1 and beginning Cardinal Quadrant 2, which ushers in the Sun to Cancer. Cancer, like Jupiter, move into Cancer. In fact, Jupiter's laying in wait for the Sun. What a beautiful mix. They come into an exact conjunction on the 24th, one of astrology's finest in terms of positivity. But the Sun and Cardinal Quadrant 2, the energy is very much about nurture, foundation, security, our approach to families, but also our inner world. And that's really what we're asked to look at over particularly the first month, but then again through the next 13 weeks. Now we have the new moon in Cancer, probably in some ways arguably the most influential new moon of the year in terms of the moon, because the moon rules the sign of Cancer. That's the 25th. But on the 26th, Mercury, the communicator, which moves into Cancer on the 8th of this month, leaves and moves into Leo and goes face to face with the tiny but potent energies of Pluto. So that's a very powerful combination too. If you'd like to talk to me one-to-one, please check out my testimonials below. Also, with year 2025 absolutely rocketing by, you can order your personal forecast for year 2026 now, get the rest of this year free, but also my special offer of 30% off, get your life roadmap report, the most important document any of us can ever read, that will give you searing insights into the patterns that have played out in your life so far, but how to work with those energies future forwards in a more effective way, and together with your forecast, time your moves as best as possible. Please see below for more. Please also check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, and also you can read your daily, weekly, monthly and yearly general horoscopes, your love horoscopes or your Vedic horoscopes too. Also, my three-card tarot is rather good too. Showing on the screen now the event chart right at the start of June. There's the Sun and Mercury very closely allied together, but we can see the Moon is in Leo. It's not far off Mars. When the Moon and Mars are together, it can create a little bit of impetuousness and rashness, but I feel because of the position of Mercury there, and also Venus, the relator to the position of Mars, you can see Venus in Aries, that's very lively. I feel it's a kind of furnace. Venus and Mars reached the peak of their trine on the 22nd of May, but they're still in contact, and you can also see that Venus is in a very healing link with the position of Chiron. So as we come into this month, conversations and the expression of affection and warmth or creativity are very much to the fore. So what about Saturn and Neptune? Well, Saturn and Neptune together, I feel, are going to bring some very positive outcomes when it comes to the production of physical energy. Now that could be through the better use of water. Neptune, very aquatic. The sign of Aries is of course ruled by Mars, but that Mars energy can be somewhat impatient. But what in some ways works with Saturn and Neptune in Aries is the role of Pluto, because Pluto is saying, look, where are we heading collectively? Because it is the planet that's very much about the collective, but it's in the sign of the community where people have the right to be individuals but also collaborate, the sign of Aquarius. So Pluto and Neptune in the sextile pretty well since 1945, and more recently of course through the signs of Capricorn and Pisces. This enables Pluto with the air energy of Aquarius to oxygenate the flame of Neptune, which of course could be somewhat put out, the wateriness of Neptune, and also with Pluto and Saturn in such a strong sextile all through this month, we could see some big structural changes. Now, with Pluto, ever since it's been in Aquarius, we've seen individuals, but also big corporations linked to communication, digital platforms and search and social media and so on, have actually become, there's been a growing consciousness of how the influence is not always something that's for the best. And what we're going to see, I feel, is people finding their voices a little bit more about reasserting their individuality. But we have to work for it, and that's what Saturn in Aries is asking us to do. But one of the things I would say is that Saturn and Neptune in Aries does suggest that despite the vibrant and energetic and bubbly energy at the start of this month, we're not necessarily going to have a huge amount of physical vitality. So what we do have, we need to use wisely. Also, I think it's possible that there could be some infections doing the rounds, sadly, through Saturn and Neptune's conjunction. So when it comes to any gatherings we go to, obviously when we all went through COVID, it was a very grim time for so many people. But there are certain things we can do in terms of our personal hygiene that we can do discreetly and just make sure that, you know, we're taking care of our personal sanitation, because the position of Aries is about our bodies, it's about our physical vitality. Saturn can be limiting. Saturn and Neptune can see our emotional energies be somewhat sensitive. So as much as it seems very bright and breezy at the start of this month, just be aware that we only have a certain amount of energy to use up, which brings us to Jupiter. Because as Saturn has got to the end of its journey through Pisces, it's obviously going to go back to Pisces on the 1st of September, re-enter into Aries in February next year. But through this next 3 months, the square with Jupiter is back in a big way, and it starts from the start of this month. So even if certain people have got positions or views that they want to tell us about, I feel that Jupiter in Gemini can overpromise. And you know, so over the last year, huge amounts of claims, counterclaims, and so Saturn in some ways can scrutinize things a lot more intently, and I don't necessarily think that's going to be a bad thing. But that brings us to the 6th of the month, because Venus returns to the sign of Taurus, which of course she rules. Venus in Taurus can be very sensual, and it's lovely if you're someone who enjoys good food. So if you're meeting people, if it's in the north and it's some kind of summer gathering, delightful to share good food and good wine. But just be conscious that Venus does square up with Pluto in week 2. If you encounter someone who really, really does capture your imagination from a kind of attraction viewpoint, if you both want the same things, the square with Pluto is not going to cause an issue. But if one of you, for example, wanted a sincere connection and the other person a fleeting one, the energies between Venus and Pluto can hide someone's true motivations, particularly through charm, flattery. So just be conscious if someone's offering you a new job and there's this and there's that, get it in writing. And if there is someone that really makes your pulse race, just check out for sure that you both want the same things, even if it is just a brief assignation, because that means neither of you will be hurt. If that is the case, it could be hot, hot, hot. But on the 8th, just before Mercury moves into the sign of Cancer, it does link with Jupiter. And Jupiter being conflicted by Saturn, because Jupiter's about the greater benefit, hope, positivity, possibilities, can be neat fortune. And of course, Saturn is the greater malefic, can constrain, limit in a very cold way. And because Saturn has been impacting on Jupiter over the last year, maybe as Mercury and Jupiter coming together in Gemini briefly could trigger some kind of significant good piece of news. But on the 9th, Jupiter makes its way to join up with Mercury into Cancer. The Cancer energy, which is going to get stronger as the month goes on, is about how we feel, and it's also about where we live. It is also about our internal world. It's also about our spiritual beliefs. It can be to do with the things that inspire us, and because it's in a square with Neptune, that desire for inspiration can be extremely strong. But if there was someone that we encountered that seemed very assertive, very sure of themselves, Saturn and Neptune together, we just need to make sure that our inner check works for us. So make sure that you're in touch with your sixth sense, and if there is a faint echo of not being sure, don't ignore it, because Jupiter can actually be overconfident. And through the sign of Gemini, one of its challenges is that, you know, it makes lots of claims, but it's more difficult to actually be factual because of that tendency to overgild the lily. Also, if you're thinking about getting a new property, moving somewhere bigger, more expensive, and part of that is because you want more room, very Jupiterian, or you want to be in the right environment, very Cancerian, totally laudable, totally understandable. But just factor in what would happen if your circumstances would change. So our desire for the right kind of home, emotional and family life can be very strong from the 9th, and it will go on, of course, for a year, but we just need to temper it with the reality of Saturn and not get confused by the mixed signals that Neptune can create when it's in a relationship with Jupiter. When they're in a conjunction, it can be extraordinarily spiritual. When they're in a square or an opposition, that's when the problems with reality can be created. But we can look at it like this. Perhaps Saturn in its square to Jupiter can just help Jupiter to be a bit more grounded in its approach. That would be a good thing. But on the 11th, the full moon is in the bubbly Sagittarius, which most certainly doesn't usually like to think too much about how things feel. But over the last couple of years, Sagittarius people have had Saturn in the 4th house, which has been a very, very big journey. So I think it's possible that as long as we're conscious of whatever dialogue we're having or whatever journey and we're going on, Sagittarius can be exploring, and where we're trying to free ourselves up, we're just really mindful, once again, just like Jupiter, of what our deeper motivations are. The 17th, Mars moving into the sign of Virgo. A lot of people who do jobs with great precision have Mars in Virgo. For example, perhaps a builder, perhaps a surgeon, something where you have to have that real attention to detail. People who might enjoy being makers or hobby crafters will often have Mars in Virgo as well. But for us at a more personal level, it just brings a real slice of reality to bear. And, you know, if we have been sort of overdoing it a little bit in terms of enjoying ourselves, that earthy energy can just help us to get a bit more in touch with the more necessary parts of keeping a routine and being a bit more ordered. We don't have to go overboard, but if, for example, we're not enjoying our work, Mars moving into this area can be the push to do something about it. The 21st, that summer solstice, ushering in cardinal quadrant 2, and a very evocative period. You know, if you are someone who loves to get together with loved ones or your extended family, or you have great connections in your community, or you have loyalties to a school, a college, an old place of employment, getting together with those people who give you that soul energy can be so gratifying for you. Absolutely wonderful. But as we come into the new moon on the 25th and the Sun's combination with Jupiter on the 24th, that energy that Jupiter in a way is asking us to manifest about bringing that deeper happiness into our world is going to be very, very strong. And in a way, there's a bit of a battle. You know, the Zodiac's biggest planet, Jupiter, very much to do with being the regal kingmaker, if you like. And we've got Father Time, you know, misery guts in Saturn, where it doesn't like to be. I really don't like to be here because no one listens to me because they just want to charge ahead, do what they want. And I can tell them, I've got things to say, they need to listen. And from an emotional viewpoint, that really can prick our bubble. So we just have to be aware that Saturn is going to play a role, along with Neptune, in terms of curtailing somewhat that Jupiterian energy. But as I say, it could just make Jupiter more realistic. And the old saying with Jupiter is, Jupiter can inspire us, but really it's the amount of perspiration we put in to match the inspiration that really matters. So in other words, We can kid ourselves into thinking that everything's possible with Jupiter, but if we really roll our sleeves up and work hard, we're much more likely to get the outcomes we desire. It's just that having Saturn and Neptune in the first house is about our need to manifest our individuality. And of course that's where Chiron is in Aries at the start of the month, and that's very important for us. But in order to get the maximum emotional connection, we have to be a bit more vulnerable, and we also have to let go of a little bit of control. And I think that's really going to be the theme over the next year, because when Jupiter goes into Cancer, that event chart with Saturn in the square is huge. You know, it is going to provide a reverberation that's ongoing. We come to the end of the month. Mercury moves into Leo. Proud, somewhat opinionated, potentially, but it's that angle to, or that opposition to Pluto. So there could be a bit of an arm wrestle at the end of the month, even if it's a proverbial one, because someone sees something differently. Because Pluto in the sign of Aquarius is more detached. It can be uber logical, but Mercury in Leo sees us much more attached to how it feels for us in terms of protecting our persona, our ego, if you like. So just be aware that could be an issue. So this is a month with the potential for emotional growth very, very strong, as long as we're realistic, as long as we know we won't necessarily have all the physical vitality we want, as long as we know that we need to be a bit careful with our personal hygiene. Mars moving into Virgo on the 17th will for sure help that. Please stay with me now as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs. So Aries, your June 2025 forecast can, on the face of it, seem very sparkling with lots of possibilities. But I feel that what you've been learning in recent months and perhaps over the last year, it's not what people say that actually matters. It's what they really mean. And most of all, what they deliver on. So I feel there's a kind of cautious you that's coexisting with a part of you that could be open to fresh possibilities. But you don't want to get too swept away. And you're realizing that however much there can be bright and bubbly interactions, it's what it actually equates to that really counts. But the wonderful news is that on the 6th, I feel that you could start to see some significant financial good news heading your way. And that can give you quite the lift. But again, because Venus is in an offset, a square with Pluto, just be conscious of what the reasons are for that change. And you may not want to be too quick to spend that money. However, once Mercury and Jupiter reach a conjunction on the 8th, you could get a text message, an email, a letter which bears more good news. But then, of course, they both move into Cancer. And that's where the experiences you've gained over the last year are really going to become much more important. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by. And back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. You're a sign that can take action. You can be the person who has the confidence to be bold. That needs to coexist now with the more cautious and sensitive energies of Neptune. And, you know, that can have an impact on how much vitality we have. But I feel like your life is going to pivot more from the start of week 2 of this month towards the more emotional dimension. And perhaps one of the challenges for you in a way is being open to let your guard down. And why should you let your guard down with the wrong people? But if you are with people that you really feel comfortable with, or you're reminiscing about people from your past, or getting together in some kind of reunion, I think it can bring an awful lot of celebratory vibes as this month goes on. The chance to travel could show up on the full moon of the 11th. The chance also to perhaps say how you feel to someone who perhaps hasn't been as sincere as you would like. But on the 17th, that's a great chance for you to really knuckle down and apply yourself to something, perhaps a domestic chore that's been put off, maybe getting a little bit more active. In some ways, thinking about your diet and bringing some extra energy to your approach to what you're eating and drinking. But then again, through the summer solstice, the sun combination with Jupiter and the new moon on the 23rd, it's all the potential to feel more in touch with what's really important in your inner world. And unfortunately, because of all the 12th house energy this year, particularly with Saturn applying to Venus and Mercury, I think your confidence has been somewhat affected by that. But the people who really, really get you, and the people you really feel comfortable with, they're the people that you're going to adore spending quality time with at the end of this month. And if you are lucky enough to be moving or improving your residency, or setting your intentions to bring that to pass, a glorious set of influences shows up, certainly as this month moves towards its climax. It's just as the month draws to a close. If you're single, you could have a flirty moment with Mercury opposite Pluto, but it could be a flirty moment where it's with someone that you don't necessarily instantly like, but you might find them hard to ignore. So a month for you that starts with the potential for a lot of connection, conversation, but it needs to be conversation that works for you, that feels appropriate, and you're going to be guarded with people who have disappointed you in the past, I feel. And that's really going to show up very much through the full moon and the 2 weeks following from the 11th. But the people you do feel safe with, those alliances could get a lot closer indeed. But it may be that you'll need to take into account other people's viewpoints and other people's emotional feelings can be part of the journey of this month too. So Taurus, your June 2025 energy begins with not just your ruler Venus, but also now Saturn and Neptune, along with Chiron, in the 12th house. The 12th house is where we can think about things very, very deeply, whether it's about how you earn a living, whether it's about how you use the resources you've got, whether it's about your connections to others. Through to the end of August, I do feel that that contemplation you go through can be enormously valuable. But it could make you a little bit choosier about who you spend time with. Because initially as you go into this month, and particularly if you have been working on the foundations of your life with the help of the buoyant energies of Jupiter over the last year, if you had to really, really work at it because of the resistance that Saturn has created in your sector of high hopes, you may actually start to get evidence of things shaping up in a much more tangible way. And with Venus returning back to your sign on the 6th, it creates a completely different dimension. Some kind of breakthrough can occur, and then by the 9th you can feel more outgoing. Yes, Saturn and Neptune are still going to just be asking you to, when you have conversations, just be more conscious about where people may be coming from. But you are going to have some sunny conversations over the next year, and even through to the end of this month. But if there is a conversation that you do need to have about a shared financial matter, about an investment, about how to use your resources, the full moon of the 11th is one which asks you to make sure whatever decisions you make are not just right for the short term, they're right for the long term, which may sound really quite obvious. But it's because the North Node, the point of destiny, the direction of travel, is in a very sensitive sign, which can be quite dissolving. It's possible that the energy of Saturn and Neptune in your 12th house could see you do something that gives you an instant benefit, but actually it might be better to stick something out, because that would be the better thing to do for the longer term. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. On the 17th of this month, you're really going to start to feel a lot stronger. Not only is the pace of life picking up in terms of communications, Mars gives you more physical appetite. In fact, you could find yourself feeling quite playful and sociable. The 21st, the summer solstice, again, more connection and communication. Jupiter and the Sun coming together on the 24th, the new moon on the 25th. Your bright and breezy persona can draw good things to you. What's not to like? Well, it could be a little bit of a lack of your own inner confidence, because if there is something from your past that's a bit unresolved, then Saturn and Neptune are going to emphasize that through to the end of August, in the case of Saturn in particular. And if you actually allow yourself to be in touch with some of your vulnerabilities and actually own them, but also be more conscious of who you open up and share information to, and perhaps just be aware of the quality of some of your connections, you can, with the right people, actually have some really uplifting chats and exchanges towards the end of this month, which can be really good for your soul. So I feel that this month goes like this. Some of the striving that's gone on over the last year, if you've really kept going even when it hasn't gone quite as quickly as you would like, a breakthrough is possible around the 8th. Then you're going to receive some communication which will lift you. There is the chance to converse over a financial matter and get things onto a better footing, but I would think long term rather than taking perhaps the easiest option, but it might not be the best one. And then with the summer solstice, the Sun returning to Cancer, the energy of the Sun and Jupiter blended together, as long as you're allowing some of your own inner doubts, don't push them away, make them part of you, bring them into you. And if there is someone who's a trusted confidant you can open up to, that person can give you some very valuable viewpoints and different angles on how they see your situation. But I think you could, in some ways, start to separate from some people who may have in the past been a closer part of your community, because I think you're actually looking for a connection to people who have some kind of meaningfulness about them. Maybe it's to do with their ideas, their interests. Just deeper people really are calling out to you by the end of this month, Taurus. Gemini, your June 2025 forecast begins with your ruler Mercury very closely positioned to the Sun. If you recall, as last month came to a close, there was a Mercury cazimi. With Mercury travelling forwards, this superior conjunction gives you a chance to showcase your individual ideas and talents. And because of the connection they share with the Moon and Mars in the prideful Leo, the chances are you can express those ideas with conviction, enthusiasm and assertion. Also, the link between Saturn and Neptune in your sector of friendship and their angle back to Pluto in the part of your chart to do with expanding your awareness suggests that new players can be entering your circle. This could be professionally. It may be through things like travel, publishing, higher education. It's possibly going to be more socially. But if there is someone in your world at the moment who isn't quite in tune with some of the things that's important to you, I feel that Venus moving into your 12th house on the 6th could be an important time, particularly in the week following then. You may become much more conscious of where you're not quite meshing, especially if you feel that someone's not quite as sincere as they could be. Alternatively, Gemini, you may find that someone from your past gets in touch, and there could be a romantic dimension to this. Yes, it could be an old flame. Now, if it was passionate between you in the past, it could be passionate again now. But you just need to ask yourself, do you truly want this diversion? Because the start of this month is a chance for you to really totally focus on what's important to you as an individual. However, Mercury moving, your ruler, on the 8th, just as it forges a link to Jupiter. Jupiter's been with you over the last year, but has been challenged for much of that time by the rather restrictive energies of Saturn. And for sure, when Mercury and Jupiter come into the conjunction on the 8th, they both by the 9th have moved forwards. But that could see some kind of breakthrough financially that you've been working towards over that last 12 months, but have found somewhat frustratingly just out of reach. Jupiter moving into Cancer is where it is exalted. This is where you can convert your imagination and creativity into something more tangible. The trick with Jupiter always is to keep a little bit of a foot on the ground. If our expectations are too high, we can end up being disappointed. And I think what Saturn's saying, particularly when the square between them is exact on the 15th, and that will be the 3rd time that that's happened over the last year, is just saying to you, yes, be very hopeful about resources and improving your situation in this regard, but don't go against what really works for you in terms of your values, because you could end up feeling somewhat compromised. The full moon on the 11th may see someone challenge some of the things that you've been doing recently. Maybe it's someone close to you could feel that you've been too preoccupied. Now, sometimes in life we have to be very single-minded. And particularly since Mars re-entered the sign of Leo on the 18th of April, you've had an opportunity to be very much more on the front foot when it comes to expressing your ideas. It could be a great opportunity on the 17th when Mars moves into the sign of Virgo, just to pause a little bit and think about those ideas and how they're shaping up. You may switch your focus in some ways through the 6th of August in catching up on some home-based tasks, perhaps some do-it-yourself jobs that are being put off. If you have wanted to improve your abode or move altogether, your desire to achieve those goals is certainly going to increase during that time. The 21st sees the summer solstice, always a critical point in the astrological calendar. This is when the Sun moves into Cancer and we usher in Cardinal Quadrant 2. Over the next 13 weeks, building up the foundations in your world is going to be a theme, and particularly over the next 4 weeks. But once again, if you are networking with new people, don't necessarily assume that the collaboration and cooperation you want will necessarily give you an instant financial return. There may be some compromises to be struck. However, if you are looking for an outright stroke of financial fortune, the 24th could give it to you, with the Sun forging one of its most prestigious links of the year with Jupiter, a conjunction. The new moon on the 25th also gives you the chance to set your intentions to improve your sense of self-worth. Look at the things you value. If you're someone who really appreciates home cooking and also growing foods, that could be a time when you really enjoy the labours of earlier in the year. But the 26th does see Mercury switch into Leo, where Mars vacated on the 17th, and that also is going to give you a desire to get your message out there. But you could encounter someone at the end of the month who sees things in a very different way to you, and that could set up a situation where if you either one of you are a little reluctant to flex and compromise, there could be something of a stubborn standoff. But on the other side of the coin, if you're really feeling inspired by something, Mercury in Leo will give you the extra confidence to pump that message out there with vigor and conviction. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. Cancer, your June 25 forecast begins with the collective of the Sun, Mercury and Jupiter, all in the healing and most spiritual part of your situation. If you have been expanding those areas over the last year with the help of Jupiter, you're going to get a payback for that investment of time and energy, which will reach a peak on the 8th of this month when Mercury and Jupiter come into a combination, a conjunction. But of course, Jupiter is going to be entering your sign on the 9th. This is broadly a once in a 12-year event. It gives us a chance to showcase our individuality. And over the next year, that could be a big theme for you. But because of the position of Saturn and Neptune from the start of this month, you're also going to feel much more sensitive to being caught up in obligations or responsibilities which don't actually give you much satisfaction. So if you have been doing something, a job that's well paid, that has some status or kudos to it, but it in some ways crushes your passion and your desire to be a free spirit, that may be something you're going to have to grapple with, not just this month on the 15th when Saturn and Jupiter come into an exact square, but over the next year too. Also, Pluto continues its retrograde in the 8th house. This is a very deep psychological part of your situation. You may be becoming a lot more conscious of working your way through issues that are related to the past. This may be to do with intimacy, could be shared finances, could be more psychological stuff. But Pluto actually forges a very strong link with Saturn and Neptune all through this month. If you are someone who works in an area that is to do with nurture, counselling or support, you could do extremely well. If you have wanted to start your own business, this month can also be very interesting, with Venus, the planet of money, but also of attraction, moving into your sector of friendship on the 6th. Someone you know could turn out to be a great person to collaborate with. But if you are thinking about going into a partnership of any kind, it is going to be important to be clear on who does and contributes what. Why? Because Venus clashes with Pluto in week 2. But by the full moon of the 11th, there could be something that feels out of kilter in your world between how something feels and the impact that has on your energy, and also how much effort and physical investment you'll put into a situation. So if you have been feeling somewhat drained, the fact that the nodal axis forges a T-square with this particular full moon could see something into the open, because the North Node in the 9th house is about information, but it's also about your higher purpose. And if you do feel it has been a case of too much give and not enough get in terms of the spiritual dimension, you may be thinking about breaking free. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by. And back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. What's going to help you is on the 17th, Mars moves into the sign of Virgo. This is going to give you more confidence to find your voice. It's going to be there through to the 6th of August. You're also going to be potentially interested in getting more physically active. The 21st, with the Sun moving into Cancer and the summer solstice, ushers in Cardinal Quadrant 2. This can be a time when you're really given an opportunity to showcase what's uniquely you. You're also blessed by a lovely conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter on the 24th. Remember, this is a very rare event for the first time in 12 years. You could find yourself feeling much more assured, much more energized, shrugging off that sluggish energy of that full moon. But also the new moon could see you want to start something afresh. Or if there's some ongoing themes in your situation that aren't working well for you, this can be a great opportunity to inject more energy and more direction into them. Mars is also feeding into this new moon at the end of this month in a very vigorous way. So as much as you may feel a bit uncertain or pulled around or low in energy earlier in the month, despite Jupiter pitching up in your sign on the 9th, by the end of the month you're really able to showcase the more cardinal energies of your sign. The architects for Cancer are very much to do with nurture, the home, family, being very much in touch with your need for physical security, being protective, perhaps in terms of your environment, finding peace and quiet. But I feel that actually it is that leadership qualities of yours that really start to flourish towards the end of this month. It's a wonderful chance for you to really think about what you want to bring into your situation that does require you to have a firm grip on your life direction. So if your life recently has been much to do with supporting others or providing a service, now you need to make it much more about how you can showcase your unique creativity, artistry and charisma. Leo, your June 2025 forecast has a number of very contrasting energies. One of the most exciting ones right at the start of the month is the moon is very close to Mars in your sign. Now that can make people rather restless, but I feel it will give you a push to be much more decisive and much more assertive about what you want to achieve. But your friendship and connection sector is also very strong at the start of this month, and it may be that you're the prime mover when it comes to getting a group of friends together, doing something around a trip or something that's sociable, and that can really help you to showcase all of the best of your outgoing energies. Venus also starts this month still in a very inquisitive part of your chart, still in touch with Mars in your sign. Don't underestimate just how alluring and attractive you can be to others, and it could be someone very different to you who really becomes much more conscious of your unique power. But on the 6th, Venus, the planet of relating, but also of money, moves right to the top of your chart. Whereas Venus has been going through a truth-seeking part of your situation, now it's much more to do with your connections with influential people. It's possible that over the following 3 weeks or so that you could have some very, very powerful conversations, and it may be about jobs, it may be about your business, and your talents can reach a wider audience. People can become much more conscious of what you have to offer, but you know, it's your charm and personality that they're drawn to as much as your skills. And yet, if you do feel a little bit blocked in an existing environment, the fact that Pluto is squaring off with Venus in week 2 does ask you to be mindful. Is someone using charm on you to disguise an agenda which isn't enabling you to flourish as much as you would like? And if you recall, last month, Saturn, the planet of limitation, but also that governs time, moved back into your sister fire sign, Aries, for the first time since 1999. It's linking with Neptune at the start of this month, and it's saying to you that through to the end of August, I feel that you're going to find yourself becoming much more conscious of the whole sphere of knowledge. Now, knowledge comes in many different forms. It can come from life experience. It can come from our instincts. It can come from education. It can come from formal business training. It can come from the fact that we've travelled a lot, gone through the processes and have all that wisdom. The 9th house very much about all those areas. But on the 8th, Mercury and Jupiter come into an exact conjunction in that sector of alliances. And if you have experienced over the last year, particularly around the business idea that you've had, some resistance in terms of creating the income that you would like, or in a business partnership, you and someone else you've been working with have wanted something slightly different, as Jupiter and Mercury move into your 12th house, you could find yourself much less outgoing than in that first week of the month. Jupiter being in the sign of Cancer is an area that Jupiter loves being in. It's exalted in this sign, but the 12th house is very much about the spiritual dimension. It can be about healing, and if you consider that Jupiter and Saturn are going to square exactly on the 15th of this month, and if that rings a bell, it's because they squared 3 times in the last year, but of course in 2 different signs. So what I feel could happen with that need for knowledge, the knowledge that can come up for you is a knowledge around your inner motivations, what truly makes you tick. If you do find yourself becoming much more interested in personal development or things like counselling, that wouldn't be a complete surprise. Also, if you are wanting to push outwards and do something that's much more adventurous, just be aware that Jupiter in the 12th house could make you perhaps more sensitive to your limitations. But don't be too affected by that at this stage, because on the 11th, you're going to discover that despite Jupiter moving into a more thoughtful area, there's still plenty of people who want a piece of you. And that's because of your unique ability to collaborate and connect with lots of different types of people. And that can be really flattering. However, if there is a situation around a friendship, around a romantic relationship or a business partnership where the financial aspects of how you both see things are very different in each person's case, it could show up on that full moon. So there could be some serious dialogue that emerges, but on the 17th, Mars makes his way out of your sign and into the sign of Virgo. And if you've really been working hard on an individual project, your artistic talents, anything to do with flair, and perhaps that journey began first of all as long ago as the 6th of November last year, you're going to see the fruits of your labour. It's just that someone else may not see things quite like you do, but you have an enormous opportunity from them to monetize, to improve your finances in a way that may have seemed somewhat elusive over the last year, with Saturn having been in your 8th house. And the 8th house is things like investment, pensions, business income, can be shared resources, property matters, and can be legacies as well. But it also, the 8th house is where we deeply collaborate. So if you have been experiencing some disappointments, and your natural optimism with Jupiter having been in Gemini has been in some ways checked off, I feel that if you've really put the effort in, you can start to see the rewards, despite Jupiter, the planet of fortune, now basically being in a more spiritual location for the next year. But remember, Jupiter then will arrive in your sign, and that's something that only happens once every 12 years, so it's something to really look forward to. But the latter part of this month does see a lot of action in that 12th house. The summer solstice sees the Sun move to join up with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. They do actually come into a conjunction on the 24th. You may hear from someone from your past. You may feel deeply nostalgic. You may find yourself reminiscing about your past. There may be something you discover. It may be an item of physical worth, material worth, or it could be something of sentimental value. But if you see this item, it can mean an awful lot to you. If you are interested in genealogy, you could discover a lot about your personal backstory over the next year. But on the 25th we have the new moon, and that new moon links very well to Mars. So Mars moves into your sector of everyday resources in the middle of this month, but can reward you, particularly for the things you've been doing behind the scenes, because sometimes there is that more upfront, public-facing type of role that Leos can be very good at. But for most of us, we do research, we work patiently, we're finding out things for ourselves step by step right throughout our lives. And something can come up to the boil for you towards the end of this month that could be very satisfying in that regard. So all that hard work could pay off, particularly if you're in touch with your deeper needs. Now on the 26th, Mercury moves out of that more psychological area where it's been with Jupiter and latterly the Sun, and moves into your sign. If there is something that comes up from Jupiter moving on the 9th to the Sun arriving on the 21st, and by the time Mercury emerges into your sign on the 26th, that's to do with someone's lack of loyalty, sincerity, genuineness. If you need to stand up how you feel about a situation, you're going to do it with enormous vigour, authority and confidence as this month draws to a close, because Mercury goes face to face with Pluto. Just be aware, if someone does see an issue slightly differently to you, they have a different worldview, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong or you're right, or you're wrong and they're right, just you see it in different ways. So there could be a bit of a tussle in a conversation at the end of this month, which just be conscious of being very forceful, because if you are very forceful, you will need to make sure that factually you're on absolutely rock solid ground. And I think you can do that, but just know the way that you're going to achieve connections to people is going to change a little bit from the 9th. It is going to develop a more subtle dimension. There may be people from your past who are going to come back into your world, or past experiences will start to come up in your consciousness in a much more powerful way. Whether you're drawn to traditional religions, modern ways of seeing spirituality, a big potential growth can unfold for you over the next year. And it can be pushed in a way by Saturn. So Saturn and Neptune, which can be very much about spirituality, are asking you to work at knowledge. But I feel the biggest area of growth is likely to be your inner connection, how you see the world and how you see yourself at quite a profound level. So Jupiter moving into the 12th house can be lucky, but it's a much more spiritual dimension than say it will be when it moves into your sign next year. And then you really are going to sparkle with the full range of your innate radiance. Have a great month, Leo. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. So Virgo, your June 2025 forecast begins with your ruler Mercury in the most visible part of your chart. The 10th house is where we connect to the world at large. Your natural ability to view situations or information in a very precise way could be coming to the attention of some key players, especially in terms of your professional or work-based situation. Now, Jupiter has been in that area for the last year and is going to be moving into a much more social and interactive part of your chart, which could prove very lucky for you from the 9th over the following year. But just be aware that Jupiter has been checked by the rather limiting and sometimes rather miserly energy of Saturn in your sector of relating off and on over that period of time. So even though Jupiter may have given you the appetite to achieve greater success or gain greater recognition, somehow or another something may have seemed somewhat out of reach. Maybe it's been difficult to just get the attention of some key players in the world that you work in, whether it is a line manager, whether it is getting the interview that you feel you deserve, whether it is that if you have your own business, the clients you really want to get have just seemed somewhat out of reach. But I feel by the 8th of this month, as Mercury and Jupiter come into an exact conjunction, even though the cold-eyed Saturn is squaring them, if you've really applied yourself over the last year, it's going to get very difficult for those people who may have been a bit cool with some of the ways you approach things. It's going to be very difficult for them to resist just what you've got to offer. So do have maximum belief in yourself as you enter this month. It's just that along with Mars, you do have the Moon in your 12th house at the start of this month, and whilst Mars is linked to Venus through to the 6th, it's still really interesting in terms of a connection that you may at that point want to keep confidential. Mars in your 12th house, where it's been since the middle of April, and then again if you cast your mind back from the early part of November through to the 6th of January, the Mars 12th house transit is one of the toughest in astrology, but you've had that along with Saturn in your 7th house of relating. So I feel the psychological dimension of certain connections. If you haven't really felt that you've been part of something, or you felt somewhat excluded, even if it's been quite subtle, or you have been experiencing some, really being ostracized in some kind of way, or past issues to do with upsets, disappointments, betrayals, rejections, accidents, anything which may have had an impact on you psychologically, Mars has been stirring up for some while. So I think, much as Jupiter is going to be moving into a much friendlier, bubblier, and effervescent part of your chart on the 9th, and you do have a lot of social energy in your chart later this month, I think the standout development for you this month, Virgo, is Mars moving into your sign on the 17th. He's going to be there through to the 6th of August. What Mars in our own sign does, particularly in your case, that precision that's part of your nature, you have the thrust, the determination, but also the stamina of Mars in the 1st house. The 1st house relates to our body. So if you have been feeling run down, those work demands, even if there have been some successes, have still been having somewhat of a toll on you, or you've been dealing with difficult suppliers, contractors, business associates with Saturn in the 7th house, or maybe your love life has had some roadblocks along the way. It's all felt quite turbulent, and even if you are someone who likes to keep things pretty steady, There may have been times when your emotions have been surprisingly up and down. So Mars bursting into your sign on the 17th is definitely the thing to celebrate most this month. It really is going to be great for you because later in the month, Mars also forges a superb alliance to the new moon in Cancer on the 25th. And because that energy of both Jupiter and Mercury moving on the 9th into the part of your chart to do with friendships and connections, even if there have been some profound disappointments with certain people, there's going to be a renewal around the people who are truly good for you. And it really starts on the 6th when Venus makes its way out of a very subterranean part of your chart, which can be very passionate, hot in Aries, somewhat impulsive. Maybe you have linked up with someone, perhaps even in a secret alliance with Venus's connection to Mars through the month of May. What you're really searching for is someone to be proud to be with you. So if a relationship can never really fulfill your ideology in terms of being for the longer term, being visible, open, honest, it will be tested from the 6th for a week because of Venus clashing with the deep transformational energy of Pluto. Because Pluto is really interested in your overall situation. Pluto in its retrograde in the 6th house could be shaking you up around some of the things that have been in place for quite some time. Now the 6th house can be the processes of our work, the 10th house is more the status, the connection to the world at large, the role that we're in. And Pluto therefore could be in some ways making you more conscious that some of the things that have been part and parcel of the rhythm of your life may need to deconstruct in order to be reconstructed in a way which is better for you in terms of your physical and emotional well-being. But on the 9th, the fact that Jupiter moves into the 11th house, but also into the sign of Cancer, where he is exalted, is a good news story. But I feel that some of the astrologers might omit to say that Jupiter is going to be squaring with Saturn as he arrives. That square becomes exact on the 15th. Why is it very important? If you recall, on the 20th of August last year, I think, and then we had Christmas Eve, and then early in the new year, Saturn and Jupiter were exactly square. In astrology, this is one of the biggest influences there is in terms of cycles, because Jupiter is about expansion, Saturn can be about contraction. If we work with them astutely, we can get a nice balance, because Jupiter can trick us to think that everything's possible. So for example, in the 10th house, if you thought that something would unfold around a career or business move that hasn't done so at the pace you would like, it will be because of the resistance that Saturn has been created. So even though Jupiter moves into your 11th house, which can be friendly, can be noble, can be about our connections in terms of our social situation, our long-term plan, the things that go beyond the material and tangible world of the 10th house, that square with Saturn suggests if there are some people in your world who do have very different values to you, you must be realistic, because that is likely to be shown over the following year. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. Now on the 11th there is a full moon. It's a full moon in your case which emphasizes the part of your chart to do with your emotions. And a Sagittarius full moon, therefore, is in some ways about the need to have some space and freedom. And whether it's physical space by decluttering the home, or it is having your own interests, perhaps getting out into nature. The fourth house very much to do with the environment, whereas the sun is asking you to really go for it in terms of your goals and ambitions. And if work is taking up too much of your resources, the full moon is asking you to be sensitive to yourself. But there is a T-square with the nodal axis, of which the south node is in your sign. So you could find yourself conflicted in some kind of way around a work-life issue, maybe the support you need to give to people, youngsters, could be older relatives, maybe domestically against work's demands, but how you communicate it to others. And the North Node in the seventh house of your situation is saying the more you can work on having very constructive relationships with people, because Saturn may have really brought a cold wind to certain relationships, the better it's going to be in trying to find that balance. But then by the 17th we have Mars move into your sign. So I really love that. We do have Saturn and Neptune in your 8th house from the start of the month. Let's think about the 8th house. The 8th house can be about intimacy, it can be about long-term financial planning, it can be about where we're most invested emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, but also intimately in terms of a very close relationship. Saturn can create barriers, of course, but it also can push us to get better at that particular area of life. Neptune, on the other hand, very interested in the 8th house. The 8th house can also be our psychological domain. If you're someone who does resist a little bit looking at some tricky inner issues, I think Saturn, this first blush through to the end of August, perhaps not so much too, but from the middle of February next year, you are going to have a couple of years where Saturn will be asking you to explore just how comfortable you are with that level of devotion, investment, or is it coming back to you in the way that you want. So that is going to be a bigger theme for sure. But the 21st sees the summer solstice, a glorious event in Western tropical astrology, which is based on the seasons. So we have the Earth point, the cardinal point, ushers the sun into Cancer, 13-week backdrop. As it does, it's in a conjunction with Jupiter. So on the face of it, that sounds all fair and dandy. It's just Saturn. So the idealism of the 11th house, which can be about friendships, is challenged in some ways by the financial reality, or the reality of what sharing really does mean. So we can have an idea or a plan. How would it actually be actuated? That's what Saturn particularly is asking you to consider. That said, on the 24th, you could have a meet-up with a group of friends or one person in particular, and it could be really good fun. The new moon on the 25th gives you a chance over the following month to take much more of a lead around certain relationships. Just be aware, however, your ruler does move into a delicate part of your chart on the 26th, a psychological area that Mars has just left, and it is in an opposition with Pluto. Someone could be surprisingly direct in making an observation about your approach, particularly to your work. You're the person who can often be very attuned to details. Someone may be attuned to a detail in your approach to something. So just be conscious that there is that lives side by side with that buoyant, bubbly energy, which is very social. So if you are wanting to meet up and have a much more interactive time through the summer month, particularly July, that new moon will help you. It's just being aware that with Saturn and Neptune in the 8th house, that is very deep stuff to do with transformation. Some of the things that we need to release that we may be a bit too much attached to, but it could see people coming into your world who are going to be profoundly important to you, but that might interfere with some of your plan, because Jupiter in the 11th house can be pretty idealistic. So it's about keeping one foot on terra firma. But if any person can do that in the zodiac, it's you. Have a great June. Take care and goodbye. Libra, your June 2025 forecast begins with a sparkling alliance between the Sun but also Mercury in the 9th house of your chart, where you've had Jupiter over the last year. The 9th house can be about travel, it can be about higher knowledge, publishing, anything to do with international affairs. It could also be to do with connecting to people who are very different to you, but that combination between the Sun and Mercury is very exciting, it's very stimulating. Also, your ruler Venus starts this month, continuing a gorgeous loving with Mars in the friendliest part of your chart, the 11th house. If there has been someone that you've been really enjoying spending time with, maybe socially, maybe it has had a romantic dimension, the angle between them peaked in the trine on the 22nd of May, but they are in touch with each other as this month begins, which is to relish. But also, late last month, Saturn, the planet of limitation, structure, that is in essence very much to do with time, Saturn moved back into your sector of relationships for the first time since 1999, when it left the sign of Aries. That's a really interesting one, because Neptune there too, the conjunction between them, can be exquisite, but it could also flag up some limitations. And I just want to take a look at Jupiter, because Jupiter, like the Sun and Mercury, has been in your 9th house, of course, for the last year. So when Jupiter moved into the sign of Gemini, even though it's technically debilitated there, that could point towards the potential to expand and have exciting connections. And you may well have had exciting connections over the last year, but unfortunately, I think you've had quite a lot of rather big demands that have taken quite a lot of time and energy, and I don't think it's been quite as easy to be the free spirit that Jupiter in the 9th house would lead us to believe you might have enjoyed over that last year. So it's been a bit of a juggle, and that juggle is in play between them as we enter this month. The good news, however, is that Jupiter is going to be moving, but just before it does, on the 8th, Mercury moves forwards and aligns with Jupiter, and maybe something you've been discussing, and it could be around a contract. If you are wanting to reach more people with knowledge or information that you have, perhaps a training course, or you've got an exciting way of creatively expressing yourself, you could finally have a breakthrough. There may be some conditions, it might not be quite as perfect as you would like, because Saturn in the 6th house does unfortunately very much emphasize a glass half empty, whereas Jupiter in the 9th is very much the glass half full. So they are sort of binding against each other in a bit of an abrasive way. But of course, Saturn and Neptune in the 7th house is really interesting, because when Saturn moves across a cusp in a natal horoscope, it will often trigger something quite substantial in a person's life. Having Neptune there as well, a very different energy. Neptune can dissolve, Saturn can resist. If there is a relationship where you feel you've given a lot, and I think it could be around your work, because the energy of Saturn over the last couple of years has been very much about giving in a practical, systematic, disciplined way to support others. The 6th house is very much about sacrifice. Moving into the 7th, it can help you to put your boundary in place. Because if you are someone, and I'm not suggesting that every Libran is a people pleaser, but if you are someone who likes to have pleasant relationships and you prefer to keep the status quo, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, I think it may seem to you, particularly with Pluto going for your 4th house, which of course is now completed, that it was more give than get. And if that has been too much of a theme, even if you're someone who does like to have equilibrium, a classic Libran desire, I think Saturn and Neptune are going to give you more strength and confidence to assert what you need. But there are some paradoxical energies developing. On the 6th, Venus, your ruler, moves into the deepest, most passionate part of your scope. So what can happen with Saturn on the 7th house cusp? It can actually bake in a very good situation as much as break down a weak one. So if you're relating to someone professionally or personally, and actually there is the mutual respect that you deserve, Venus moving into the 8th house can make that connection that much more devoted, and that can be exciting. Also, Venus going into the 8th house can be quite sensual. It also squares with Pluto in your 5th house of romance. In week 2, you may find that someone comes into your orbit who makes your pulse race, but you're not quite sure what to do. Because on one hand, the Sun, Mercury, at the start of the month, Mars and the Moon in the 11th house, very friendly, but Mercury and the Sun and Jupiter in the 9th house, it's about being more expansive. And then with Venus going into that 8th house, very, very deep and passionate, but the Plutonian energy is about you expressing your individual needs. So are you going to get deeper with someone, or is that 8th house energy of Venus going to reveal someone who, as much as they may be exciting and connect to the vibrancy that I feel that you're going to be giving out at the start of this month, you do need to make sure that it is right for you. So there may be a big attraction, but Saturn and Neptune immediately are saying, are you going to go against what you've decided recently, where you really need to set those boundaries? Interesting. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. Then on the 9th, Jupiter joins up with Mercury, which moved the day before, into the sign of Cancer. The great news, if you are someone who wants to add to your skills, there could be an opportunity to go on a course. It may be something more informal that you can download online, watch someone on YouTube to gain some particular skills, or it may be that you are going to apply for a new job, because the 10th house is where we showcase our talents in a more visible way. So Jupiter, the planet of growth, moves into that area for the next year. So there are possibilities here for fortune. That's what Jupiter's about. It's the greater benefit. But the greater malefic, Saturn, is squaring it. And I think we have to realistically be conscious of this. So as much as there could be opportunities to increase your earnings, gain greater status, and also receive praise for your talents, they will want something back, and that may provide some demands which could be somewhat limiting. So there will be a hand coming towards you over the next year. I feel there will be opportunities, but I think you may have to collaborate and cooperate with some people who might not necessarily be your absolute cup of tea. So a bit of compromise is needed in order to seize the golden prize, but the golden prize is definitely there, Libra. Now on the 11th we have a full moon, and it's a full moon in the sign of Sagittarius, which for you is brilliant because it's bright, breezy, quick, fast communication. The other side of the heavens, the 9th house, is about those more meaningful conversations, But interestingly, they are T-squared by the nodal axis. So Saturn over the last 2 years has been quite punishing. Neptune since 2012, quite draining in terms of having to give a lot to others. So that nodal axis in particularly the North Node in Pisces is making you aware that if there are conversations to be had, and it is about what you do, the detail of what you do, and demands that you can have in a practical context, make sure that your communications are all crystal clear in order to protect your position. Because on the 17th, Mars moves into a bit of a tricky position, just being really honest, through to August the 6th. If there is a situation, I think especially professionally, but possibly personally, where some outstanding issues have not really been resolved. They could relate to your past. They may be to do with disappointments, breakups, betrayals, because Mars in the 12th house could reveal some people who don't have your best interests at heart. The 12th house can be in traditional astrology parlance as being the sector of secret enemies. And Mars, because of its rulership of Scorpio, can be about ruthlessness. So just be aware you will need to watch your back a little bit through to August the 6th, because the Sun through the summer solstice and the cardinal point moves into the most visible part of your chart on the 21st, along with, of course, Jupiter. We're also going to have Mercury's there as well. So all of that can help you to raise your profile. The part of your chart that is giving you the sunshine, essentially, to draw admiration your way. But just be very astutely aware of the machinations that could be going on. For example, you could have competitors, someone else who might be rather jealous of the progress you're making. There may be someone who makes out that they're your big buddy, but they may have an agenda. That's the type of stuff to work on, because I do think that some kind of big opportunity is coming for you at the end of this month, but not everyone will get it. But you know, ironically, Mars in the 12th house could be where you've shown a lot of effort and energy behind the scenes. It could relate to past connections and particularly professionally. So there may be someone that you've worked with in the past who has quite a lot of clout, who can be a big supporter of you. So this is the interesting thing about astrology. It's never one-dimensional. There's always a polarity. There's also the upside and the downside. The upside of Mars in the 12th house could be that influential colleague, connection, employer, contractor from the past who actually really gets your value. And they may want to actually work in a strategic way with you, because the Sun connects with Jupiter on the 24th, ordinarily one of the luckiest days of the year, and then the 25th, the new moon, again with Jupiter in the mix. So when it comes to aspiring to what would help you to showcase the range of your talents, the fact that that new moon links back to Mars in your 12th house in a constructive way suggests that sometimes it's not always the obvious things that we do that grab us that prize. It's not always about being ultra confident and self-assured. Sometimes it is about being able to build relationships, and that's your great gift. So my view would be that Saturn and Neptune in your 7th house, used right, can give you the ability to let people know what you won't do, but also be loud and clear about what you will do to collaborate. And if you can strike the right balance between the growth of Jupiter and the collaboration of Saturn and Neptune, and the fact that the Sun, like Jupiter, is high in your chart towards the end of this month, along with that new moon, Mars in that confidential but influential part of your chart, by the time Mars comes into your sign on August the 6th, your whole professional or worldly interactional landscape could have shifted hugely, but in the most positive of ways. I hope you have a great month, Libra. All the best and goodbye. Scorpio, your June 2025 is going to see your two ruling planets hugely influential. Mars and also Pluto. It begins this month with a collective in your 8th house. The 8th house can be in a more psychological way where things shift in life. Now, you have an appreciation of that more than most zodiac signs. You know that life can be intense, can be quite stable, and then go through big alterations. And that's what the 8th house can be about in a more psychological context. But it also can be about money, long-term money, investment, shares, savings, possibly even digital currencies. Because at the start of the month, the Sun and Mercury are in a sparkling alliance. They actually reached an accord at the end of May, which was glittering. So you may have made some really big decisions as May came to a close around investments, property, savings, shares, pensions. Something to do with a legacy may have been discussed as well. But also Jupiter's been in that part of your situation for the last year. And Jupiter has a reputation, of course, as being lucky. It's the greater benefic. But as it comes into this month, it is in a square with the greater malefic, Saturn, which is in the part of your chart to do with risk, speculation, but also romance, fun, self-expression. So over the last couple of years, Saturn's been asking you to work hard at your talents, but over this last 12 months, as much as part of you may have wanted to do things that have improved your financial situation, it may have been a little bit off and on. At times you've done things that have seemed very positive and may have paid off. At other times you may have felt more cautious. Maybe it's around your romantic situation that things haven't quite been rattling along at quite the speed you would like, because the 8th house can be about devotion, where we get most intimate, where we're most dedicated to a particular person. But on the 6th of this month, Venus, the relator, which has been in a very practical location, but forging a stunning link to your traditional ruler Mars, suggesting one professional relationship may have really improved in the latter part of May, and that could still be something that feeds into the start of this month. But once Venus moves into your opposite sign on the 6th, that can really be very beneficial. Venus loves being in the 7th house. It's also going to square up with your modern ruler Pluto in the second week of this month. That can be quite tricky. If someone offers you something and uses a bit of an emotional response in order to attract you to that opportunity, maybe about a job, maybe someone who fancies you, but if they're pulling at your heartstrings, just be a little bit careful. Sometimes with Venus and Pluto in a square, people can ladle on the charm in order to get what they want, but that won't necessarily be something what both people need. Now, it's also a possibility that someone that you already know, maybe connected to your family, could become a much more significant figure in your life. Having Venus in your 7th house from the 6th can help the equilibrium of situations. It asks us to celebrate the things we have in common, not the things that make us different. And because it's in its sign of rulership, it's a very sensual place for Venus to be. So if you do enjoy sharing good food and good wine with friends, connections, or possibly one special person, that's all fair and dandy. Just be conscious that Pluto in the 4th house, and it's going to be there for the long term in its retrograde, is seeing your emotional needs amped up in ways that may not be enormously obvious. So the 8th house is about transformation, the Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and you have Venus from the 6th in your 7th house relating, but Pluto in the 4th house from the start of this month. It's going to be about big changes around where you live, how you live there, and who you're with. And because Pluto does forge a link to Saturn and Neptune, newly arrived in Saturn's case on the 25th of May last month, that's a very practical part of your scope. So practical changes to where you live are in the mix. How you relate to others is in the mix. There could be some conversations about long-term finances, but also the potential to get closer or not so close to someone you're encountering. But what about your traditional ruler? Well, Mars starts this month in a very dominant location. If we go back to the early part of November last year, through to the early part of the new year, then again from the 18th of April, through to the 17th of this month, Mars has been in a very powerful location. And that may have helped you to put across your viewpoint, be quite confident and assertive, show your leadership credentials in a very positive way. And as I say, Mars starts this month in a great link with Venus. So the charm of Venus links with the power of Mars. And that may be something you can capitalize upon. But Mars is then going to be moving on the 17th of this month into a much friendlier part of your chart. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by. And back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. But let's just rewind back to the 8th. Because Mercury catches up with Jupiter, and if there is something you're discussing around a contractual matter, a business affair, do you know you could have a slice of fortune as long as the detail is not something you skip. Saturn in the 6th house really demands precision. Neptune in the 6th can be a bit sloppy about those details. So just really concentrate if someone's offering you something. But I feel something really important can come to pass across the 8th and 9th of this month, because Jupiter then moves into the 9th house. It rules the 9th sign of Sagittarius as well as the 12th sign of Pisces. But Jupiter moving into the 9th is great for contracts, deals, international affairs, travel, export, import, buying and selling. So you've got the two marketeers together, Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury moves into your 9th house on the 8th, then Jupiter the 9th. Also a great time for you to be setting up some kind of plan, holiday, vacation, higher educational course, marketing something you've got to sell. Maybe it's to do with higher education, maybe it's to do with publishing the book. Everybody feels they've got a book inside of them. That would be a great opportunity to go for it, and also over the next year. But just be conscious of when Jupiter moves into Cancer, where he is exalted, so it's a very strong position for Jupiter to be. He is clashing with Saturn. So you've got one planet's about go, the other is more about no. In simple terms, what they do in a square is they fight for dominance. Jupiter can be a little bit free and easy, perhaps even a bit too carefree, maybe a bit unconcerned about details. Saturn saying no. If you really want to go to where Jupiter can take you over this next 12 months, you must be precise. It's really important. Because on the 11th there is a full moon, and it's very much about the ins and outgoings around your finances. It's T-squared by the nodal axis. There's a flamboyancy that could be coming in with you at this part of the month, which would be good to see. You know, I feel that you can be quite cautious. You can be very canny. You very rarely miss things. And that ability to use that perception, but in a very structured way with Saturn in the 6th house, is going to be a real asset over the next year, I feel. But the full moon is, if something's out of kilter about the give and take of everyday finance against long-term finance, it's a good time to scrutinize all those energy bills, those services from telephony and broadband and mobile phone contracts. See if you can squeeze a bit more out of your situation by using that canniness that's so part of you. But I do love the fact that Mars moves into a friendlier location on the 17th. And in fact, the latter part of this month gives you the chance to just really open up your life and enjoy some fresh air. If you're someone who is very diligent, Scorpios often are, you live your life in a very systematic way, you're really being urged towards the end of this month, Scorpio, to broaden your horizons. Now, for many of us, that can be as simple as a change of routine in a particular day. It may be even altering what we watch on the TV, choosing to perhaps consume different types of films, maybe going for a walk a different route, perhaps deciding to take a day off spontaneously, perhaps also booking that vacation. Because if you can, get away from it all towards the end of this month, it will be so good for you. But Saturn does square up the Sun's arrival in Cancer with the summer solstice. Cardinal Quadrant 2 is ushered in, a big part of the year for you to be more expansive. It is linking with Jupiter. That becomes exact on the 24th. Could be lucky again around a contract deal. The 25th, the new moon, again Jupiter's in the mix, but so is your traditional ruler Mars. But then your modern ruler Pluto is back into the picture at the end of the month as Mercury climbs to the top of your chart, replacing Mars, and it can give you a great assertion and clarity, but it is in opposition with Pluto. You might find yourself, especially if there's been a whole raft of good news towards the end of this month, someone close to you may raise some kind of objection or give you faint praise, and it could really be irritating, to be honest. And you may give them short shrift, and they might deserve it. Because I feel Saturn, as it has been over the last couple of years, in your 5th house, and Neptune since 2012, it's not been a bundle of laughs necessarily. It's taught you a lot about to celebrate your talents, and that the perspiration and application, which is so important to deliver on that talent, means that sometimes we have to narrow our focus, and that means it's more difficult to do exactly what we want. I feel you're going to get an opportunity to live a freer life as this month goes on. And you know, if you have been yearning to head off to a particular location, somewhere that's rather exotic, somewhere that's got a strong historical background, if you're someone who's always wanted to investigate the genealogy of your family, all that 9th house energy is superb. If you're someone who has thought, look, I never got the opportunity to do that degree or that diploma when I was younger because I had to take a lot of responsibility for the family, do a job, you might seriously consider over the next year getting that next stage that gives you a greater sense of self, because it's something you've always wanted. It could be about learning a foreign language, learning to play the piano, whatever it is that you feel you haven't quite had the chance to embrace, that's different and fresh and stimulating. Give yourself the permission to go for it as this month goes on, but you are going to have to be very disciplined to get the return on the change of scene or the stimulation or the new beginnings that you may engage with. They will take steadfast application as well. Sagittarius, your June 2025 forecast is going to see a lot of discussion about your ruler Jupiter repositioning in the water sign of Cancer. Now, it's exalted in Cancer, so that's a blessing. But for you, it's house 8, which can be about deep transformations. But it has been over the last year in your sector of relationships. How have your relationships been? Because if we think of Jupiter in isolation, despite its technical detriment in Gemini, that should have given you something really significant, some kind of improvement, and it may have done, but it may not have done so without a certain amount of hard work or application. Why? Because the bête noire of Jupiter is Saturn. So Saturn, the greater malefic, has battled with Jupiter, the greater benefic, for pretty well all of the last year. So you haven't had the full benefits of an unadulterated Jupiter transit through your sector of relationships. It's come from perhaps a greater understanding of your emotional situation, Saturn in the 4th house. And some relationships which may have seemed promising may not have made or gone the full distance, because what you've gained from Saturn over the last couple of years is a much clearer understanding of what's not going to work for you in terms of your inner world. So people see you as a larger than life character, which clearly you can be. But actually, there's been a lot of changes going on deep within you, and those have been very profound. But of course, at the end of April, Neptune moved into your 5th house, which is very creative. Then we had Saturn move to join up with Neptune on the 25th of last month. So as we come into this month, they're in the part of your scope to do with enterprise, to do with speculation, to do with being a bit more risk-taking. But Saturn and risk is not something we usually correlate together. But the 5th house can also be about joy, fun, creativity, children. Saturn, as ever, can reward us like it may have rewarded you over the last couple of years around your home and family life, where you may have gained a lot of insights by working hard at that part of your situation, and now it's priming up a new opportunity. And Pluto, the planet of change, is in a fantastic alliance with Saturn and Neptune for the whole of this month. So your words and your thoughts can have very great impact on others through June. So that's delicious. And as we come into this month, Mercury, the planet of communication, talk and thought, the intermediary, can be to do with being very analytical, is in your sector of relating, but it's also in its home sign, and it's also emerging from a stupendous combination with the Sun right at the end of May, which may have helped you to realize or crystallize in your mind exactly the type of relationship you deserve, exactly the type of relationship you will hang out for, or if you're in one, to appreciate the benefits of what you have, because no relationship is likely to give us everything, but what we can do is celebrate what we get and work on the bits we don't. So some kind of alliance may have shaped up as last month came to a close. So as you come into this month, although Jupiter may have been a bit elusive around relationships over the last year, Mercury meets up with your ruler on the 8th of this month, and some kind of conversation, discussion, could be a contract, because Jupiter and Mercury are very much about trade and marketing. The 7th house can be a partnership. Something really significant can shape up at the end of the first week of this month, which really sees you celebrating. But they are in a square with Saturn. So however much we recognise that Jupiter moving into Cancer is a great place for him to be, the 8th house can transform where you're devoted, long-term finances, business affairs, maybe around intimacy. It has to work in terms of Saturn as well. So Saturn in the 5th house is a bit anti-risk and speculation. The 8th house is where there can be transformation, and they're not necessarily going to make it exactly perfect for one another over the next year. So we are going to have an ongoing square, which plays out exactly this month on the 15th, but because when Jupiter, once every 12 years in that 8th house, moves into Cancer, it's challenged by the planet of limitation. So Jupiter's about reward, and Saturn is much more about resistance. So I think Jupiter will get a lot of publicity this month, but I think we do need to be really conscious of Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, the square between Saturn and Jupiter in particular. But on the 6th of this month, Venus, the relator, moves from your fellow fire sign, where she's really been lighting up things in a magical way in a fantastic alliance with Mars for the latter part of last month, peaking on the 22nd. They're still in touch at the start of this month. We also have the Moon and Mars in Leo linking brilliantly to Mercury at the start of this month. So I feel there is going to be a sense of excitement and anticipation as you begin June which is something you can really relish, I believe you're going to feel there is a shift, a significant shift. And that in itself, for a sign that's got such an appetite for new experiences, is just great for you. But in week 2, Venus, after having moved into a home sign of Taurus, which is very much about practicalities for you, the 6th house, Uranus has been making that part of your situation very unsettled in recent years. So routines may have been somewhat elusive. So Venus squaring with Pluto means there could be a discussion in week 2, and it could be around a job, or it could be around finance, and that discussion could be important. But if you encounter someone who seems to be a little bit too good to be true, don't rush into the situation, is all I'd say. Because there is that brilliant link between Mercury and Jupiter by the 8th, only a few days afterwards. You just need to decipher what the true motive of whoever you're talking to is, and it could be a completely pure motive. So you can meet a lifetime partner with Jupiter and Mercury in a conjunction in the 7th house. You could forge an alliance with someone that works brilliantly well for many years to come. And if you're both on the same page and your values align, Venus, and the power dynamic between you also aligns, Pluto, there's no worries, especially if you have very similar belief systems. But on the 9th, Jupiter fully moves into Cancer, connecting with Mercury once more. But on the 11th, we have a full moon in your sign. If you're not happy in a relationship, this could be the time when you decide to bail out. And I'm not telling you to bail out, because Saturn in the 5th house is just going to make you much pickier about what you will accept. So if you've been going through something very deep and tricky, perhaps, for example, one of the things that seems to play out with people these days, as accommodation is so expensive, people often will buy or rent a property together, and then their relationship changes, not necessarily for a sinister reason, it's just what happens. And they both have an asset, but they don't really want to be in the same physical space. That kind of stuff can be really tricky. And because this particular full moon is also squared off by both the south and the north node, the T-square, the emotions around your relationships are going to come to the fore. And that's why Jupiter moving into the 8th house, which can bring devotion, can bring lust, can bring intimacy, can bring a lot of money over the next year, but it has to work in terms of the lessons you've learned with Saturn moving through your sector of emotion. Because what that's taught you is how you feel is the primary dynamic, and Saturn in the 5th house is where we want joy, but Saturn can be a bit cautious in the 5th house. So I think that it's going to be very interesting on that full moon. Now remember, relationships don't have to be romantic. It could be with, someone you've been hanging out with. It could be someone you've known for a long time. It could be a colleague. Just a divergence, really, of what you want is possible. But on the 17th, Mars is going to bring something of a gift to you. Because since the middle of April, and for 2 months at the end of last year, start of this year, we had Mars in your 9th house. So that more restless, adventurous part of your nature has had to coexist with that cautious, more emotional dimension that Saturn's been bringing. But Mars moves into a very dominant part of your chart on the 17th. But I mean that in a really positive way. So it moves into an area which can help you to strut your stuff in a very self-assured way. So if you want to take on a leadership role, you want to start your own enterprise, someone reaches out to you because they want to pick you to come into their business because they know you've got skills and talents that really can be so dynamic for them. Some kind of greater recognition is coming through for you, Archer, through to August the 6th. Be ready for it, because it could be very exciting indeed. The 21st sees the summer solstice. The sun moves into Cancer, ushering in cardinal quadrant 2. Very important in Western tropical astrology. For you personally, this can be a 13-week period of transformation. You are going to be conscious of where you're most invested, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, intimately. But then we have the Sun and Jupiter meet in a conjunction on the 24th. I don't know what your personal situation is. I can't know, can I? Everyone's will be different. But for some archers, there could be something in the works that you're not even aware of to do with a legacy, an inheritance, an insurance payout. If you have been involved in some litigation, good news can come as this month draws to a close. The 25th is the new moon. The new moon in Cancer obviously is about nurture, protectiveness, can be about the home. The 8th house for you can be about the finance, the process of change. Sometimes change requires us to let go and release what no longer serves our greater good. Sometimes it requires us to move forwards by getting into something which requires commitment. Sagittarius is by nature, don't get into things easily. You know, your need for freedom is very strong, but I do feel that Saturn has changed you forever over the last couple of years. You become much more conscious of protection. So that Cancerian energy that comes from the new moon is to do with protection, security, nurture, but it's supercharged by Mars in the most powerful part of your chart. So if you are wanting to make some decisive moves around a business, money, property, perhaps an improvement scheme, you've got it all coming together, but Saturn's still saying to you, do consider the details, do consider your vulnerabilities for whatever you decide to go for. Don't just go into something without considering those things, as you may have done in times gone past. As the month comes to a close, Mercury moves into a free-spirited part of your situation. If it has been somewhat of a breathless, full-on month, if you can book to do something completely different and spontaneously as the month comes to a close, or head off somewhere, go and take in a museum or a concert or a conference even, some kind of unexpected change or excitement at the end of the month can be just what you need to give you a little bit of space really to try to process what is going to be an extremely intense but very exciting month potentially, where a relationship could become so much more, but equally it could become so much less, but you're in the driving seat. Thank you so much for joining me, wishing you all the best, have a great June, and goodbye for now. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. Capricorn, your June 2025 forecast begins in quite a practical way, but it's not going to stay practical. As the month goes on, there's going to be some wonderful opportunities for connections to others. Every year, when we have the summer solstice, the sun moves into house 7, very much about relating of all kinds. Doesn't have to be just in a romantic dimension, but Jupiter, the planet of joy, moves into that area for the first time in 12 years on the 9th. So that sets up a fascinating shift of energy towards the end of this month. And that's where the focus rightly will go. But we need to be conscious of the role of your ruler Saturn. If you recall, on the 25th of May, Saturn moved into Aries for the first time since 1999. But it had been over the last couple of years for you in your 3rd house. So your interactions with neighbours, with technology, your experience with modes of transport may have all been quite acute during that period of time. But Saturn's moved into the part of your chart to do with your home environment, your emotions, your feelings, your need for protection, your need for security. And there is going to be a link with that energy to the relating potential that comes in with Jupiter from the 9th. But if we wind back to the start of the month, the newly arrived Saturn, linking with Neptune in your 4th house, are actually in a very constructive link with the planet of change, and that is Pluto. So if you are altering something around a property this month or deciding to move altogether, your timing could be really impeccable. And part of the reason for this is that Pluto can rejuvenate. Sometimes it can take things down which are no longer working. So there may be a change of income going on in your situation. But I think some goats could be thinking about working from home if you're not already, or providing a business in your local community, particularly a business which helps other people with their domestic chores, such as repairs, anything to do with walking dogs, gardening. These kind of jobs could be something that could call out to some Capricornian people. If you're someone with technical or professional skills, the flexibility of working from home could be something that you have experienced, especially through the COVID years. But if there's an addition to that role that you could get into, where you could flex into something on a part-time basis and work your family demands around it, that too could be a factor in your thinking. But with Mercury and the Sun having aligned perfectly at the end of May, there may be a detail that you've become aware of that you're excited about in how you can shift something. Small shifts, if we add them all together, can add up to something much more substantial. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. But on the 6th of the month, Venus, the planet of relating, moves into a very romantic part of your chart. That's lovely. But Venus is also about money, and the sign of Taurus can be about enjoying the good things in life. You may find yourself doing that at times this month. Venus does clash with Pluto across week 2. There may be someone you encounter who you find very, very attractive. They may find you equally alluring too. The key with Venus in a square with Pluto is to be sure that both parties have the same motive. Pluto doesn't always reveal its hand. So if someone's being very flattering, playful, charming, flirty, well, just be conscious of what the true motive may be. If it's a fling and that suits you, all well and good. If one of you wants something more lasting, however, that could cause some upset. So just be conscious of that. But on the 8th, as Mercury and Jupiter come into a conjunction in the sign of Gemini, it's a really symbolic connection, this, because Jupiter has actually struggled in Gemini, I feel, over the last year because of your ruler, Saturn, which on 3 occasions has exactly squared it, but within 2 or 3 degrees they've been aligned in an abrasive, restrictive alliance for much of that time. Jupiter's about growth. The 6th house where it's being is about health. If you have had or encountered any issues to do with a limitation around your movement, or just the demands you have in life mean that you seem to have had very little time, I feel that you have a chance to understand what you've gained from it, even if it hasn't always been easy. They both move, Mercury later on the 8th, Jupiter on the 9th, into your sector of relating. The great thing about Mercury being in your 7th house is that helps you to be a bit more detached if people have different views or different approaches. Mercury in Cancer can be a bit subjective, so sometimes what you hear from others may not necessarily be exactly what they mean. But on the whole, I feel the detachment of Mercury can be an asset. But Jupiter moving there, and they both connect again on the 9th, there could be a connection with someone, a meeting, which has some kind of serendipity around it, and it's a serendipity that could be repeated before the month's end. So some seriously good luck could be out there for you. What's not to like? Well, on the 11th, there is a tender full moon. It's in a very psychological area. Something could get revealed, a conversation that you're not expecting. Maybe it's going to be a critical colleague, a picky colleague, but try to retain that diplomatic approach that Mercury and Jupiter are asking you to see the best in others. Because, to be honest, Saturn is going to be squaring Jupiter on the 15th. It is structurally one of astrology's more challenging influences. Jupiter's about hope, positivity. It's the traditional ruler of good fortune, the greater benefit. Saturn, your ruler, is the greater malefic. So they're chaffing. The 4th house energy of Saturn means that if you're not quite conscious of your emotional identity, or you're feeling a little vulnerable, it's harder to forge successful partnerships of any kind. So if you do encounter someone and you're not quite sure, or you feel a bit inhibited, very Saturn, that could stop something flowing that actually has some glorious possibilities. Now, Mars has been in a very passionate part of your situation since the 18th of April, and last month forged a very intense link to Venus. It could be that you did have a connection with someone, but it might not have been around intimacy as much. Maybe it was around a property matter. Some kind of discussion on the 22nd of May may have seen you spring open the door of opportunity. But Mars now moves from that very powerful and passionate 8th house into the part of your chart that's to do with new experiences, adventure, independence. And this is the interesting thing, because with Jupiter and Mercury, then from the 21st with the Sun, from the summer solstice in your sector of relating, the Sun and Jupiter connecting perfectly on the 24th, the new moon on the 25th, that links brilliantly to Mars in your 9th house. It could also be a time when you decide to leave a relationship. I think the chances are there's more prospect of you developing constructive new alliances, but of course it depends on each person's situation. What you may get from Saturn being in your 4th house is that if some of the conversations you've had over the last year have left you bruised, demotivated, perhaps overly criticised, misunderstood, and the impact of that is being felt in terms of your inner world, Saturn in the 4th house, however much someone might try to collaborate and be pleasant, for you that moment may have gone. And I think Mars being in the 9th house could prime you in some ways to seek your freedom and independence from a relationship which no longer serves your greater good. Now, I must stress this, that relationship could be with your bank. It could be with a particular supermarket. It could be with a friend. It may be with a business partner. It doesn't have to be in a romantic context. But something around the balance of power around relationships is going to shift, because you're going to develop, on one hand, greater positivity, but also a greater certainty about what you deserve. And on the other, you're also going to perhaps be more demanding about the nurture that you deserve as well. So you're prepared to collaborate, but it needs to be fair to both sides. And I feel that you're going to raise the bar on what you will and will not put up with, using, straightforward language. So the new moon on the 25th could be very exciting over the next month. If you do go on a holiday, a vacation, and you go on your own or with a group of friends, you could encounter someone really interesting. Maybe it will just be a meet-up, some really exciting and fun at times, not necessarily even romantic, intimate, but just some excitement around certain connections. And even though Saturn's in that fourth house, just that blast of invigorating energy can just really be what you require. So Saturn in the fourth house, we have to be really honest. If you go back to 1999 and the 2.5 years before that, that's when you will have experienced Saturn going through your fourth house for the previous time. Now, you may not have been alive then, but if you were, that was probably a seminal time for where you live, who you live with, family affairs, anything to do with construction around a property, or perhaps to do with adding to your family or demands around your family. So there could be a repetition over the next couple of years. But this phase of Saturn is just through to the end of August. From the 1st of September, he inverses back into your third house. So there may be one relationship that has more discussion to be had. But if there are points of collaboration, cooperation, mutuality that you can develop in the latter part of this month, it's going to be really good for you. It could be professional, could be some kind of contract that's going to develop. It may be that you're going to have to be quite resilient in terms of the demands of that. But if you know what you want emotionally and you know what you're prepared to give, some really important new beginnings are developing for you around all sorts of connections with others. Have a fantastic June, Capricorn. All the best and goodbye. Aquarius, your June 2025 forecast begins with as a zesty collective in the sign of Gemini. Gemini is about quick wits, can be humorous, can be mischievous, certainly fun and never dull. And that includes the rule of the sign coming out of an exact conjunction with the Sun right at the end of May. Because Gemini can be about conveying ideas, the fifth house can be about showcasing your personality and charisma. You're going to be on top form as you come into this month. There's also a link between them and energy in the sign of Leo. Leo is the sign of being rather proud and sometimes a little more confident, and you've been supported through the energy of that sign of Mars, particularly since the 18th of April when it was out of retrograde but in that opposite sign. So it's giving you a little bit more self-belief in terms of how you've linked with others, but also perhaps helped you to be a bit firmer on your boundaries. But at the start of this month, Venus, the relator, in the chatty third house, is still in touch with Mars in that seventh house. So I feel that whether it's around someone you're interested in, whether it's a project that inspires you, whether it's your social situation, there's a lot to like at the start of this month. But your traditional ruler, Saturn, moved on the 25th of May into the sign of Aries for the first time since 1999. Aries for you, where Venus is about those quick, fast communications. It can be about our belief systems, the third house, connections with siblings, neighbours, our everyday world. Can be these days about technology, but certainly about social media and stuff like that. Now, Saturn's first visit is just through to the end of August, and of course it is being shadowed by the elusive vibe of Neptune. However, they're both in a very strong alliance with Pluto in your sign. In its retrograde, Pluto in the first house is very much about a development. It's about an evolution of who we are. Sometimes some parts of our being make way because we're recreating something like the phoenix, which is more suitable for us. But the first house is very much about identity. But Pluto's encouraging you and me to have more self-belief about what makes us different, because Aquarius people have a reputation of being zany, but there is a duality to Aquarians. Some Aquarians will want a more peaceful life, certainly the last 10 degrees, the Venus sub-ruled people. The middle 10 degrees can be quite chatty. The first 10 degrees of Aquarius, in terms of the decans, can be more revolutionary and outspoken. But whatever type of Aquarian you are, over the years to come, there is going to be a big shift in your situation. But because the first house links to the third house with Saturn and Neptune, that change of your identity, but how it is conveyed to others through quick communication, even if Saturn can slow things down, means that your words, your thoughts, your ideas are likely to have a much greater impact on other people pretty well from the start of this month. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more. Then, on the 6th, Venus the relator, despite that flirty link to Mars, which peaked on the 22nd of last month, moves into the practical for you, home-based sign of Taurus, which she rules. But that can give you a real appreciation of your immediate space. If you're in the south, that may be getting comfortable and cozy for the winter. If you're in the north, it may be beautifying your garden, inviting people around to spoil them. Venus in Taurus loves spoiling. It may be that you are thinking about redecorating, getting some new furnishings. Venus loves being in Taurus. But if you are someone who appreciates growing your own vegetables or cooking from scratch, Venus can also emphasize that part of your nature too. But Venus is in a square with Pluto, and that can be quite complex. Venus can charm, Pluto can hide its motives. So there could be something around a family matter that's been very disruptive over the last few years, and someone might be minded for a rapprochement. And you're going to have to make a decision if that happens, whether you want that to happen, whether you feel that really that is merited. Because if someone really owns something where perhaps something has broken down, that's a world of difference than someone who just basically wants to put the dispute behind them because it would make them feel better, but perhaps it would leave you feeling still with the same set of injustice that you may have had in the past. So just be conscious that Uranus has been pushing you to find your emotional and familial authenticity in recent years, and it's been a long and possibly painful and disruptive journey, maybe even about where you live. So I wouldn't give up on what it is that you've been pursuing in that time too easily because someone decides to charm you. Just be conscious of that. But on the 8th, Mercury moves forward and merges with Jupiter. Mercury can be the merchant. It's very much about business. Of course, it is the intermediary, so the messages that we all share these days, a lot of them. But Jupiter can, of course, be about luck. But the 5th house can be about speculation. If there is something that you're really sure could work well for you, that is different and new and fresh, that could be a very, very important date for you. Now, ironically, Mercury later that day moves into Cancer. Mercury in Cancer is not the best technically, because the wateriness and the subjectivity that Cancer can have can erode the precision and detachment that Mercury likes. But you know, the 6th house is actually redolent of the energies of Virgo. So as long as you don't get too caught up in how it feels, here you can slice through and get to the tiny details which are so important. Now, Mercury's joined by Jupiter on the 9th. Jupiter loves being in Cancer. It's exalted here, whereas in Gemini, it was detrimented and clashed with your traditional ruler for the last year. So however much you tried to expand in the last year, somehow or another, it all was very slow. And perhaps financially also, there were some headwinds. But Jupiter and Mercury moving into the 6th house can see you developing a can-do attitude. That's not to say you already have it, but you're going to want to apply it somewhere. So the great thing about the 6th house is it can be about providing services. Jupiter can be about enthusiasm, but the 6th house can also be about physical health. If you do want to get more active, that combination will certainly give you a lot of ideas and perhaps some potential communication. But stern Saturn does square Jupiter. It doesn't become exact until the 15th. If you recall, we had one in August last year, we had one on Christmas Eve, we had one on the 3rd of January, square between Saturn and Jupiter. One is about expansion, one is about potentially retraction. Now they can balance each other in a positive way. So here with Saturn now in your 3rd house, that is your ideas, but also your mode of communication. The 6th house is where we are obligated to others. So the big lesson over the next year is you could offer something and it could come through for you in a big way, and people could really like what you offer, but don't over offer, because if you do, you can end up feeling stressed out by trying too hard, essentially. So important to keep it really real around ideas and what you're going to offer. The 17th, however, sees Mars dive deep. A kind of scorpionic vibe of Mars moving into your 8th house. If you are wanting to convert some of the collaborations you've been developing into something more profitable, you've got a great chance through to the 6th of August. But also Mars in the 8th house could see a relationship which has been developing get a lot more hot and intimate. But Mars in the 8th house can also be about where we can feel quite compulsive, particularly around spending money and on big ticket items. Just be aware of that. You might feel you can and deserve to, and good for you if so. The Sun joins Jupiter, Mercury on the 21st with the summer solstice. Cardinal quadrant 2 comes in. 13-week period for you, about getting all the practicalities working in your life if it feels right. That's the Cancer. The 6th house is the detail. We have the connection between the Sun and Jupiter, which occurs once a year in the conjunction. It's usually very lucky. The 6th house, if you have a pet or would like a pet, they can bring joy to you towards the end of this month. If you do provide a service for people, that service could be a real success, providing the detailing and the delivery of your message doesn't overgild the lily. The 25th is the new moon. If you have been feeling a bit sluggish, there's parts of your existence which leave you feeling a bit run down, perhaps find it difficult to sleep as well as you would like. Your diet could be improved. A great opportunity with this new moon to think about and gain ideas. It's also a great time to perhaps reorganize your finances, because Mars feeds into that new moon in a very constructive way. Mars in the 8th house can also see very determined to improve your lot, squeeze more of the resources you've got. The 26th sees Mercury move into your opposite sign. Now Mercury in the 7th house is fab, really, particularly in Leo, because it just has a little bit more sort of self-belief, but opposite almost straight away Pluto in your sign. So at the end of this month, there could be an intense conversation. But Pluto, if you're submitting to it, is transforming your identity. And that then can be conveyed through the power of Saturn and Neptune in the 3rd house. So as much as Saturn's in its full in the sign of Aries, Aries is about new beginnings, fresh energy, physical vitality. Saturn can obviously moderate those things. So it is going to be important to not overcommit, not just this month, but over the next year. But I also feel you can transform your physical vitality, well-being and health by giving yourself an honest overview. Perhaps go in to visit someone who is a nutritionist, or reading stuff online that can help you to recreate your approach to how you use your energetic resources. But if you can focus on making your life more efficient and streamlined, some very, very good stuff is coming through for you. And don't underestimate the power of your message or your ideas. Have a great month, Aquarius. Pisces, your June 2026 forecast is going to see your traditional ruler Jupiter move into a new sunny home. Yes, on the 9th, he's going to go into the sign of Cancer, where he's exalted. That means he glows up. But also, because it's a fellow water sign, that fits your triplicity of water, and that's very much to do with emotional expression. The 5th house is where we can be joyful as well, playful. And you're also going to have the summer solstice with the sun returning to Cancer on the 21st, ushering in cardinal quadrant 2. The quadrant's very important in Western tropical astrology, which is based on the seasons. The significance is the sun meets up with Jupiter, which can be extremely positive, in an exact conjunction on the 24th. We then have a new moon of consisting of the sun, the moon, but also of Jupiter on the 23rd. And the new moon in Cancer is particularly resonant because the moon rules that sign. So as far as the moon's concerned, it's her favourite new moon of the whole year. They're also going to be linking in to Mars. Mars, the planet of passion, has actually been giving you quite a lot of support in terms of your physical vitality. It might not have felt like that because Saturn has been with you over the last couple of years. Saturn in the 1st house can be quite draining, as you know. But what happened was on the 18th of April, Mars switched back into Leo for the 2nd time, this time out of retrograde. And that could have helped you to just develop a little bit more resilience, durability to some of life's pressures. But by the 17th of this month, Mars moves into your opposite sign, which is brilliant. Also, Mars is going to collaborate with that new moon. So the more playful, self-expressive, social part of your scope, the 5th house, is blessed by the wonderful, warm Jupiter, which is very much about faith, optimism, and good fortune. And Mars, the planet of assertion, is going to help you to push back, mark out your territory in terms of where you have to connect to people competitively, where you can be more combative, but also where you can be more self-assured around all sorts of relationships. So that's the big picture. So let's now drill into the detail. Because as you come into this month, it might seem a little on the quiet side because the Sun and Mercury have been in an exact conjunction as May came to a close. But if you have been thinking in an inspired way about your home, how you can adapt it, make it more flexible, have a small enterprise from there if you work from home already, how you could make your personal space a little more comfortable, how you could perhaps get better broadband services. You may also be thinking about inviting family or friends around for a gathering, because that 4th house energy is actually coming in to celebrate having had your traditional ruler Jupiter in the 4th house over the last year. But guess what? Jupiter wasn't really given a chance to flourish in quite the way you would have liked because of Saturn being in your sign. So the planet of plenty was limited by the planet of frugality, Saturn, over the last year, 3 times exactly. And as we come into this month, once more within 3 degrees, they are in a square. So Saturn's in your, maybe in your 2nd house at the start of the month for the first time since 1999 in Aries, but it is still in a dissociate right angle with Jupiter. However, Saturn being in Aries is going to make you really mindful of your self-worth and value. You're going to get an initial blast through to the end of August. Neptune's there, your modern ruler. Neptune, I feel, in some ways can moderate the harsher energies of Saturn. To be honest, Saturn and Neptune in Aries, which is the sign of energy and initiation, can be a little bit of a bogging down vibe, but I feel you can turn it to your advantage by becoming much more conscious of what's truly valuable to you. because Saturn in your sign over the last couple of years probably has in some ways pared down quite a few different parts of your existence. You may have let go of certain interests, friendships, involvements, because you just needed your life to be more simple. Nothing wrong with that at all. But Pluto in your 12th house, very much to do with your accumulative experiences over a very long time, but also the psychological domain, that's linking excellently to Saturn and Neptune right through this month. Don't underestimate how much you know, how much experience and knowledge you possess. And the important thing with Saturn in the second house is not to think about life only in terms of money. Saturn in the second house could see some changes around income, but it could also give you an opportunity to work out what isn't actually that important to you. So you may find yourself changing pivoting towards things that perhaps have a more spiritual dimension, maybe a more earthy dimension, cooking food from scratch, being a little bit lighter, perhaps being much more into things like upcycling, perhaps recycling things you no longer need, living a bit lighter in terms of your personal footprint on the planet, not necessarily because you're a committed environmentalist, because it just makes life easier. There's less burdens, less decisions to make about what to do, what to spend money on, because you actually realise that it's about what's going on in your heart that really matters. And that's the critical thing, because Venus has been blessing your finances recently, and there may have been some good news in the last half of May, and there can be at the start of this month. But ultimately Venus moves into a chattier sector on the 6th. But over the following week, although you can be uber charming in that period of Venus being in the sign of Taurus, Pluto's saying to you it's really important to be sincere. You might be surprised by someone you hear from. Could be an old flame. I'm not saying it's going to work out. You just could hear from them or think about them or check up on them on social media. But on the 8th, Mercury moves forwards and connects with Jupiter. If you are someone who has a small sideline at home, you could do something really positive at this time and have a breakthrough. Mercury then moves into the playful, light, flirty and humorous 5th house, joined by Jupiter on the 9th. What a blast. These two are still together. In their own way, they can be super and very, very hopeful together, but they are in a square with Saturn. And that reaches a peak on the 15th of this month. But I just want to remind you, in August last year, on Christmas Eve and the 3rd of January, Saturn and Jupiter were exactly square. One's about growth, one's about containment. But if they're balanced, we actually get a decent outcome. But it's a very important structural influence in astrology. So for you, the emphasis switches on where they're going to have that impact. So I think that Jupiter in the 5th house is really encouraging you, after perhaps the cool years of Saturn being in your sign, to reignite your belief in the charisma that you have, to focus it on situations, whether it's your talents artistically, whether it's to do with being a maker, a creator, whether it is to do with cooking, whether it is to do with writing, film, photography, whatever talents you have. What Saturn's taught you is to narrow down onto the things that are right at the nub of your existence. Now Jupiter and Mercury give you the chance to glow up the good bits, but Saturn's there saying don't overdo it, particularly around speculation. 2nd house, money. 5th house can be about risk. So Jupiter can see us caught up in enthusiasm. Just be a little guarded by that. But then we have a full moon on the 11th. But it's a full moon that sees your feelings very close to the surface. If something is out of kilter in terms of where you work, because you don't really enjoy the environment, the people aren't very nurturing, there's a lot of demands on you, you could find yourself with a big decision to make. But on the 17th, Mars moving into your opposite sign is going to give you a real toolkit to deal with the situations that may require a little bit more direct discussion. I don't want to use the word confrontation because I don't think it needs to be that. Sometimes avoidance is countered by the thought that if we have a discussion, it's confrontation. No, avoidance is just the opposite end of the spectrum of confrontation. If we're dealing in a proper way with our need to assert ourselves, but also we're open to hear what other people say, we're in balance. And that's what Mars can help you to do. On the 21st, with the sun glowing up into your 5th house, you could be in for a magical time over the next month with the conjunction with Jupiter, the new moon, and they're linking back to Mars too. So new collaborations can come through. These are going to go all the way into July. All you've got to do really is make sure that you don't go against your core values, Saturn in the 2nd house, that you're decent, Neptune in the 2nd house for those who are perhaps less fortunate, that you are a little bit thrifty, but thrifty for a purpose. And if you focus the energy you do have with passion, whether it's into a person you find irresistible, whether it is an interest you've got, whether it is a talent, use that personality to maximum effect towards the end of this month. But just make sure you don't spend a penny piece more than you need to, because your innate personality and charisma is what your true currency is going to be as this month draws to a close. Have a great month, Pisces. All the best and goodbye. Year 2025 is absolutely speeding by, and back by popular demand is my very unique personal horoscope offer. You can order your year 2026 forecast now, but also get the rest of year 2025 free. Also, my special package, which is totally unique to each person it's produced for, you'll get your life roadmap report. This is the most important document any of us can ever read, because this helps to give us searing insights into the patterns that are played out in our lives so far, but importantly, how to work with that energy future forwards in a much more effective way. The forecast helps you to time your moves to the best advantage. Please see the link below for more.